thank you for tolerating hearing from us all of these times. It's fantastic. It's really, I always say it's really awesome to see people show up to have these conversations, because so often people don't engage in this way. So I really appreciate it a lot, and thank you all for being here and taking time to hear from us tonight. So I'm Shannon Braddock, and I am running for the 34th District State Senate seat. And the question I get asked the most is, what compels you to run? And so, of course, I'm led to talk about my 3 children. I am a single working mom with 3 kids. And my youngest is 11. She is just started middle school this year at Madison Middle School. All 3 of my kids have gone through Seattle Public Schools. But this last year, she came home anxious and upset because she was hearing, she's adopted from Korea, and she was hearing that kids were sending back to places that they were born. And she thought that that was going to happen to her. So we had a conversation about that. I was able to reassure her, but of course I also had to tell her that's not real for a lot of families, that a lot of families do live with that fear. I could not reassure her that there were not other kids coming home with that fear on a daily basis. So it really opened up a big conversation in our home about immigrant and refugee communities, what that means, how we can address it in our own lives and in our communities. And of course, continue to hopefully work in support of our immigrant and refugee communities. And then my middle son is 14. He's a freshman in high school now. And he's not a big fan of school, to be honest. And so I try to say, what's the most interesting thing that happened with you at school today at our dinner times? And one day his was quite literally that he had spent the day trying to figure out where to hide or how he would escape if an active shooter came to school. So needless to say, that's also very upsetting as a mother to hear that, because I want our teachers and our kids focused on learning and socializing and the things that they should be focused on in a school environment. And so I am compelled by that as well. And then my oldest son is now 19. He is a freshman in college. And he came out when he was 16. He's gay. I have always been an advocate of our LGBTQ communities. I'm really proud of the way this state stands up. But we are seeing at the federal level and continue at the state level attacks on the civil liberties of our LGBTQ communities. So for me, that is personal, obviously. And I am now not just an ally and advocate. As I say, I'm a mama bear ally and advocate, which means look out, because I will stand very strong on all of those issues should I be elected to the state senate. So those are some of the things that personally just compel me in my day-to-day within the walls of my home. But I've also been very engaged in this community. I've lived here almost 20 years. I am currently on the board of West Side Baby. Prior to that, I was very actively engaged with the West Seattle Food Bank. I helped to manage their strategic plan several years ago. I was very engaged with my kids' PTA, admittedly when they were younger. Now I'm kind of write the checks and show up to occasional meetings, I'm not going to lie. But I advocated on behalf of education, on behalf of the PTAs in Olympia, and then have been active with the 34th District Democrats as well. And because I used to be married, and I was divorced and made the decision as I was going back to work, and I knew I wanted to go back to work at some point, and it took me about 7 years to finish a 2-year public administration degree from the University of Washington, and then I was able to go back to work about 8 years ago. And I have worked in public service at King County over that period of time. So I currently work for the county executive, Dow Constantine. I've worked for him for about 2 years. And prior to that, I worked for 6 years for Joe McDermott as his chief of staff. He is the King County council member that represents the 8th district, and it encompasses a whole lot of the 34th district. So I feel I have a whole lot of really good experience to bring to bear related to constituencies of the 34th, related to our communities here in the 34th. And I've had experience working in a political setting that includes both Republicans and Democrats, because the King County Council has both Republicans and Democrats on it. And so I've worked on moving legislation that I think is important and impactful, like our implementation of our Best Starts for Kids levy, our Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services levy, work on immigrant and refugee protections and services, homelessness and housing affordability issues. I have worked on those issues in a bipartisan setting. So I feel that combined work experience and then my community experience and my personal perspective would represent this district well, and so I'm excited about the possibility of becoming the state senator from this district, and excited about this opportunity. And I think, as has been pointed out, it's not often that you get people like my opponent and myself able to run for these kind of seats. There are no single moms of school-age kids in the state senate, right? You are seeing in front of you people who don't often have the opportunity to have these kinds of positions, because this system was not set up for a single income family, for working families, for people who are taking care of kids, right? It was set up for a very different perspective in a very different time. So I'm pretty excited about that possibility as well. So that's a little bit about me, but again, mostly Q&A and happy to answer questions. And I know a couple were already put out there, but I don't know how we want to.
Okay. What do we have?
Joe told us how he's being funded. Mm-hmm. How are you being funded?
So I'm being funded by, I also pick up the phone, as Joe said, that's the worst part, picking up the phone and making all the calls. So I do accept money from a wide variety of organizations. I've been endorsed by over 15 labor unions, so I've accepted a lot of labor union PAC money. I've accepted money from businesses. I've accepted money from a vast amount of individuals. I'm unable to self-fund. So there were people in the primary who were able to put in like $15,000 and $10,000 of their own money. And so we had to make a decision about how we were going to move forward. And so I can't self-fund, and I have donations from a wide variety of people.
Who else?
Can I ask the same 1 to 10 question?
Yeah, well, I figure we're going to be doing a lot of the repeat questions.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would honestly go with about a 4 or a 5 probably for where we are now. I just think there tends to be built a lot of bureaucracy in these systems, and I think we often stick with things because change is hard, and it's hard to change those systems, and I would like to see us do more work at the state level using data-based outcomes. Not everything is suited for that, but a lot of things are, and in my work at the county, I've seen, for example, to account for levy dollars that we spend in our Best Starts for Kids levy, that is a voter-approved levy. We set up innovative programs, but we have to demonstrate to the public and to the taxpayer that these programs work. So we talk about the outcome we want first, and then we talk about what we need to do to get there, and then we talk about how to fund it, right? And then we step forward and say, okay, here's what we did. Here's how many people we impacted. It's working, it's not working, do we need to revamp it? I would like to see the state have a little bit more of a lens like that in many areas. But.
A lens, you mean like an accountability lens?
Mm-hmm. An accountability lens, like a few more report card type situations, yeah.
I hardly disagree with that. Thank you.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on job creation in the district? I feel like Seattle in general is going to, the number one job is programmer, right? And then we have got a bunch of baristas, just to say it loosely. What's in between? Where are like the manufacturing jobs, the old-time Boeing jobs, et cetera, that are specifically in this district? Now they're maybe in Auburn and Kent, but not everybody is going to go through a 4-year plus education, graduate school.
Right. Well, I mean, and we have a great example, like Nucor in this community is a great example of a place where you can go and have a living wage job without necessarily having a 4-year degree. You can get trained for a specific job at Nucor. And so there are certainly places like that in this district. I would like us to do more outreach in our high schools and even earlier to start showing kids opportunities that are outside what they might, a traditional 4-year liberal arts degree, for example, right? So I would like us to have more people coming in, demonstrating opportunities with apprenticeship, showing what kinds of things are available. Now, realistically, manufacturing is also shifting, right? So I think we need to be talking about shifts to clean energy style jobs, other more innovative opportunities, whether it's with solar work, there's a lot of that in this district as well. I think there are a lot of opportunities, but what we need to do is get the people that are in those trades and in those businesses to kind of come in earlier so people can see those opportunities and start talking about them. And also, of course, it's a great small business community. And so I think incentivizing and frankly, for me, I would love to have a small business, if were I to be elected, I would love to have a small business advisory group to talk with me about what are the barriers, what are some incentives we can do, how can we create an entrepreneurial opportunity where there might not otherwise be one.
I'll go ahead and throw out the one that I threw to Joe, and that's just kind of what the state can do as far as what the federal government's not doing, Paris Climate Accords, that type of thing, just kind of what your thoughts are and what we can do as a state. Yeah,
so I'm also a supporter of Initiative 1631, the carbon fee. Again, I think given the great coalition that came together to create this initiative, I am hopeful that it will pass. There have been concerns from labor, for example, about transitioning to clean energy jobs because you have people who work in carbon-based industries, and if they lose their jobs, it affects their families and it affects their livelihoods, and we have to acknowledge that and talk about that and provide opportunities and resources for that transition. And I also am thrilled that we have talked about returning money to those communities that are most impacted. Particularly, we have communities along the Duwamish that are highly, disproportionately impacted by our carbon-based industries. And so returning the money and the resources to those communities and using it the way the communities talk about will be impactful for them, I think is also a big deal. So I'm a supporter of 1631. If it were not to pass, I would definitely want to continue moving legislation like it on the Senate floor. And we have some leaders in the Senate and the House that have been working on this. I would want to continue to work with them so that we could at least move as many pieces of the initiative as a whole in the Senate as possible and through the legislature.
David?
Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
So just to clarify, I think this is what you're saying, but since I've been volunteering with 1631, the initiative does account for jobs retraining.
Yeah, yes, no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think it's great. I
Yeah.
love that it did such a
Yeah,
good job
that
of
is.
encompassing all of those. Yeah.
Could you tell us what changes in the tax system you would advocate for?
So I too am a supporter of a capital gains on that 1 to 2% wealthiest of the population here, with a homestead exemption, with fixed income exemptions, because realistically, retirement is a whole different animal than having massive amounts of wealth. And I, like most of you, I imagine, are somebody who, because I have a house that I purchased, 14 years ago, I am house rich but cash poor because my property taxes have doubled in the past 5 years, right? And we are wholly dependent on our property and sales taxes. It is incredibly regressive. I do believe we need to expand our options there, and I do believe we're going to have to demonstrate again to taxpayers that we can be held accountable for, okay, we'll do this with a capital gains tax, we'll reduce your property and or sales, not a pile-on, try to demonstrate, we're trying to balance it out, show how we can do it, show how we can use those dollars to move more efficiently, and then also talking about closing some corporate tax loopholes, some benefits that they have, and making sure they're demonstrating they provide public benefit. I've been talking a lot about the Washington Budget and Policy Center has an Accountable Washington platform that they use. They talk about 22 out of over 600 tax breaks that they think we could look at closing right now. I think you could pull out a solid 5 to 7 of those to talk about right away and be saying, where's the public benefit? How does it add up? If it doesn't, we're going to put that money back in the system. Things like luxury services, for example, are not taxed. So I think there are some opportunities there.
If the state income tax starts to gain some steam?
Well, I think I would totally support a state income tax. It's absolutely, I think, a more consistent, more reliable, and certainly more fair revenue source. That said, some comments we've heard in the room tonight, I also hear on the doors a lot, is people don't trust that we aren't just going to pile on to the taxes that are already there. So I think we really do need to make some of these, what I'll call smaller changes. It's a big lift to do them. I don't need to diminish what it will take to move something like this in the legislature. But I think we need to make some of those changes first to, again, demonstrate to taxpayers we can be accountable, we can be trusted, and then we can start talking, I think, about more wholesale changes. But
Okay. Oh, back here.
Shannon, thank you very much for being here tonight. Very impressive story. I don't know how you all do full-time mom and so forth. But similar question that I asked to Joe, and then sort of a follow-up question on the jobs and industry question. But again, the big picture question, again, accountability. How can Olympia try and lessen the strain on the middle class? And I might take exception on the income tax, the capital gain tax, I think you mentioned to Joe. But just maybe that big picture question. Then secondly, on the jobs and industry question, I agree. I think the industry is, a lot of industry is shifting away here. Part of that's just the changing nature of the economy. The local in Seattle is very hostile to business, I'm afraid to say. And I'd be interested to hear what thoughts you might have on how the state might mitigate or offset that. There's also, of course, the PSRC, the regional planning agency here. They have an industrial lands policy, but as Seattle land gets more expensive, industry gets pushed out. And so those good paying blue-collar jobs are gone. The new course here, but Seattle energy rates are going up, and maybe someday they won't be here. So what do you think the legislature can do, state policy-wise, to sort of retain these heavy good industries and that type of issues?
So that's a big question. And I do think when it comes to the Growth Management Act and protection of industrial lands, I think we need to stay committed to that work. work. And it is hard to do when you have all these pressures, but I want to see us making sure the cities, all of them, not just Seattle, are actually staying committed to the structure and the work that we do with the Growth Management Planning Council, with the Growth Management Act. And I think we're seeing that cities are, in often cases, not stepping up the way they're supposed to and holding up their end of the deal there. And so I want us to, that is something we've been trying to look at the county as well. How do we either incentivize, stick or carrot? How do we make sure that cities are doing their part? So I don't have a blanket great answer, but I know that it's something we need to continue putting a focus on and trying to really figure out ways we can incentivize municipalities. And is there something the state can do, some parameters the state can set, some ways that we can either, punish and or reward cities that really step up appropriately when it comes to committing to our planning, our long-term planning issues.
Incentivizing is the best, it's probably the better start.
Yes, I agree, but I'm not sure what the best incentives are yet, right? I think that's ongoing conversations we need to keep having. And the issue about it being a state thing is, for some municipalities, that one incentive is better than another, right? And so how can we provide that flexibility? And then on your bigger picture issue, I do think what we run into most of the time is it is a lot harder to get, in this age of media and this quick return on information and all of this, constituencies get flared up real quickly, elected officials can get flared up real quickly, and I think we oftentimes don't think long term, we don't think upstream, we don't think prevention rather than reaction. And I think it's easy to for people to fall to that, it would appear. I would like to see us do more and better long-term, it's not sexy, but long-term good governance thinking. I think that so many of the things we move forward are about catching headlines right now, not about actually solving a lot of problems. And so I'm somebody who likes to have a philosophy that it is about trying to get to the long term, where are we trying to go and how do we get there? And to not be distracted by sort of the hottest thing on the table at the moment. But it's a big challenge, I think, as we're looking, as we're seeing fringes of all types of politics, gear up. I think it's important to stand up and be somebody who talks about, no, let's solve this problem. Here's the problem. How do we get there? Who do we bring to the table? But I agree, it's an issue as far as not just being reactionary to things and to not just responding to something in the short term. I think, frankly, the McCleary solution is an example of that, where we have sort of put our finger in the hole of education funding and got through a lawsuit, but we do not have a long-term solution yet. So, yeah.
King County government seems to support safe injection sites. You having been in those executives' offices, how do you feel about that?
I would support safe injection sites in the spaces and places where the communities wanted to have the safe injection sites. The concept of them is that if you have an area where you have people who are congregating and shooting up, frankly, in public, you can provide a space where they can be inside, and then you can also provide resources, because all the data demonstrates that people have to be exposed, like to a caseworker or a social worker, numerous times before they'll build any trust with them to be able to hopefully move them on a path to recovery. So, but it's not about putting, this would not be a good location for a CHEL site. We don't have, there's not a big, I work in Pioneer Square where you see a lot of drug activity. And so I think it would very much depend on the community and on the space.
You don't feel it's an incentive for drawing people here, but this is a great
I don't, and actually it doesn't demonstrate that it does. So when they do these, it doesn't show that actually is something. People are not likely to go somewhere just to be able to shoot up inside of a particular building.
Have there been specific locales where they've got that data, where they've done this?
Well, Vancouver has a thing, but it's very different than what we are talking about here, what our King County Seattle Public Health is talking about. I have some people who can provide you a lot more specific information about this if you're interested in some of the details of that. But no, I don't believe it's actually an incentive to. No, I think we have an opioid addiction problem, and I think it's one of the ways to try to shift people to recovery. But I don't know that so far nothing. We don't have any sites. There's nothing happening there. But
Let's see if we got any. Do we have another question over here somebody hasn't asked?
Could you respond to the same question?
oh, yeah. First of all, I want to say, I love being in a community where we celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day and having that be an important part of our conversations. I grew up in Bellingham, Washington with the Lummi Nation, and so we did a lot of community activities, in particular with the Lummi Nation where I grew up, because it was important for my family to acknowledge and to be a part of. And I would absolutely say that we need to acknowledge Duwamish, and I think continue as we're doing all of the public policy work we're doing, making sure that we are working with all of our stakeholders, and particularly our tribes throughout the region and throughout the state on virtually, on all of the issues that we work on. Anything we're doing related to the environment, the work we're trying to do to save the orcas, the work we're doing to impact for climate change impact, all of that is very important to have all of our diverse communities, and in particular, I believe our Native communities providing input.
I understand what you said. Where do you stand on federal recognition?
Yes, I would support federal recognition. Yeah.
Let's go ahead.
How do you think that we in this community and in this state should support, how specifically should we support immigrant and refugee populations?
I think there are several things we can do that we've seen. I think we need to be careful about who we're providing data to. I don't want us providing data to ICE at the federal level that is not data they have permission to have access to, that it is illegal for them to have access to. When it comes to services like our public health services, for example, we have communities that are afraid to come to clinics now and afraid to come to spaces where they think they may be monitored in a way that would put them in danger. And so I want to be certain that we are doing things with all of our immigrant refugee communities where we're going out into the community, which our Seattle-King County Public Health is working on these things now to try to be in community, find out ways that we can actually provide those services without having people have to come to a specific site or a specific location. I think stepping up in those ways, and then making sure, frankly, we're just connecting people with the right resources that they need at the right, in the right space and place, whether it's related to housing or childcare or any number of issues where we can provide those connections. I think, again, it's because of the federal government creating this fear and this anxiety. I think it's all the more important that we are the ones doing the work to go into our communities. And that requires us to have some flexibility with funding, some ability to attract the people who are appropriate to those jobs. And I think we've seen some good pilot programs in some things we're doing at the county, both in our veteran, seniors, and human services work, and in our Best Starts for Kids work, that has been successful in doing that. And so I think we need to look at those successful models and try to figure out how we can expand on those.
I want to expand on that issue. My wife is an immigrant from the Philippines. She went through the legal process to come here in a legal manner. There's a legal way to come to this country. And why are we not, there's rules and regulations. I think we need to follow these rules and regulations. I understand a lot of these kids came here as young and we want to help them, but we need to also acknowledge there's a way to come here legally, and we need to follow those rules.
I appreciate that. I just don't want to create a system of fear amongst communities that are here, whether it's here for the short term or for the long term in hopes of staying here. And so I believe we have created an environment of fear and intimidation, and that's what I want us to step away from.
Do you have a question you want to ask?
I think
Okay.
Then
I was going to ask a question, and I'll throw it back out there.
So if we get into a budget shortfall situation where there are three departments, let's say, that are producing, and if we were, on the opposite hand, if we have another tax windfall, so to speak, moving in and similarly spending, would you support a rainy day fund? And if we had a rainy day fund, would you spend it or would you hang on to it?
Well, I think it depends on what you would want to spend the rainy day fund. I totally support.
I'm asking you what you want to do.
Well, I support having a rainy day fund, and I think we need to keep it at a level I did not like raiding the reserves for the McCleary stuff. I would have liked a different solution to that because I think it's important to keep reserves. Education, though, if we had a windfall of money, is a place where I would want to put the money, right? Paramount duty, I think education would be a top priority for funding. So. It's a good question. I would have to I would have to be looking at actually what was in front of us in that time. There are any number of small things that you can do, and then there are the way bigger picture things you can do, right? Like there are boards and commissions we can probably get rid of that save, incremental amounts of money. But if we're really talking about doing, it would frankly depend on the severity of the situation. And again, that becomes where then you're sitting down and you're saying, okay, here's where we are now. Here's where we have reserves in certain funds, right? Some capital funds could have reserves, some operating funds could have reserves. What can we work with? How do we navigate it? Where do we really need to make sure we don't get ourselves into an emergency situation that puts people into danger? And then how do we go from there? I mean, I think it just requires an exercise.
Well, I liked what you said about long-range thinking and planning, and to me that includes, efficiency down in Olympia.
I don't want to see the legislature tax students with tuition increases like the last time we had a recession. This created a lot of problems with
Tuition's out of hand, yeah.
We need to, tuition, I think students need to pay for college, but when I was going to school, and I'm sorry, it's just more of a comment, the state paid 75%, the students paid 25%. When my son was in school, the state paid 25%, the parents paid 75%. It needs to be like a 50-50 at the university level. And at the community college level, the students need to pay at least 10% just to get some skin in the game. Because I don't think free at that level, people will appreciate. They need to have some skin in the game. And so, I don't want to see tuitions go up to cover, that's tax essentially. And I don't think that was right the last time. The state should have cut out of things.
All right, I'm going to ask a question. You may have said this and I didn't quite catch it. The first question, to preface the rest of it, is kind of where you live and the challenges you have getting on and off this peninsula. And then kind of building on that, recognizing you are in the area and you recognize the challenges we have here with regards to the bridge and the ferry and transit and the light rail buses and all. And again, also recognizing it's the city and the county and Sound Transit. But what ideas, what can you take to Olympia? What can you do? What's kind of your ideas in terms of helping this community with transportation challenges?
I live over near Madison Middle School, and I ride either usually the 56 or the 57 bus to work, or I take the C line. I take either the 128 or the 50 down to the junction, so I can take the C line. And so I'm a huge fan of our Metro Transit system. And I think we're going to see it obviously challenged when we have our viaduct transition to the tunnel. And so we're, going to be getting more services. Hopefully it'll be interesting to see. It's going to be important for us to manage that appropriately. So I just, as a bus rider, that's something I'm certainly interested in. We have issues here around, we've got the bridge. I'm a big fan of the water taxi, and I would also recommend for folks who can commute that way, that's something that you should look at because it's another alternative to get to downtown. And I think we are also seeing, because the federal level has not stepped up the way they should and the state has not stepped up the way they should, we have failing infrastructure. And so I would like the state to step up in that way and to try to work with the federal government to try to make sure we can actually do more things too, to just make sure our roads can withstand all of the increased traffic, all of the increased, the population. The population is really causing more and more damage to our roads and to our roadways, and that is indeed a huge regional issue. We've got some good work going on at 509 that involves several municipalities stepping up and partnering and having grants, and I think we're just going to have to continue making sure we're seeing all of the places where we can partner and make sure we are getting as many dollars in as soon as we can in these investments, because they are big long-term investments. And so I'm excited about Sound Transit coming here. I look forward to that, but we're a ways from that, and we need to make sure we have our infrastructure in place to support it when it comes as well. So I think where the state can help with things around transit-oriented development, issues around our infrastructure funding, I think those are places where you see the state really need to step up.
Just following up on Ms. Jones' comment, and again, likewise, glad to hear you talk about strategic long-term thinking, specifically with respect to state budgeting. And it's my understanding right now is that WashDOT Federal is starting to do some budget cuts in areas, and DOT's funding situation is obviously a very unique situation in progress with the gas tax decline as a funding source and so on and so forth, and cost overruns and other things I won't get into. But I think strategic thinking about, you never know where the next black swan is. At some point, our global economy is going to crash, and that's when it's going to be really challenging leadership of where do we cut things, and again, getting back to where are the basics of government, and if there are these extraneous commissions and extraneous things that the state should be doing, and high-speed rail studies that will never be built, those are the things we should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the kind of stuff, as I was saying, I think that's the kind of stuff you look at in the big picture, and you start to talk about how many little things add up to the big things. Let's get moving on those because it's going to matter.
I've got a question for both of you. I'm wondering, what do you think the biggest difference between you and your competitor is? So how will you represent us? How will you represent us in a way that Joe can't? How will you represent us in a way that Shannon can?
I mean, I can't speak for, I think we just bring our different personal perspectives and life experiences to the job, whether it's our professional experiences, our personal upbringings, all of that we bring, and in my case, it's that I'm a single working mom. I think a lot about access to childcare. I think a lot about what healthcare means to families. I think a lot about working family wage jobs. I think about what it means to be a single income person in this city, right? That's my perspective, and that's what I bring to the job. And then as I said, in my professional life, I actually have experience moving legislation and working with people I don't agree with all the time and doing it effectively. And so I think that is one of the things that makes me, a good candidate for this job. But I think it's just fair to say we just both bring you say what you want to say.
Could you please come up so I can get both of you on video for this?
And I was going to throw some at the both of you too, so.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no, mine's a softball.
Look, we're very lucky in the 34th to have great representation and a deep bench of folks willing to run for office. This is not a knock on anybody. We personally don't take corporate PAC money simply because there's no ambiguity in terms of where my values are and where we stand and what we'll fight for. So, born and raised in this district, the people here helped my family and myself in our greatest time of need, and I will fight with that level of passion and that level of fervor for everybody here as well. So again, we're very lucky to have a deep bench, folks who I think will do a great job representing our community. I just feel as it's almost ridiculous that I'm the first person of color to have won the primary in this district, just because there's such a breadth of diversity here as well. So our biggest thing is that we want to make sure that we include everybody in this community and making sure that the voices here are heard at all levels of the government.
Okay, I'm going to throw my softball question to you guys. So you guys are at this national conference of state senators, and you're talking to people from the other states. What is the best thing about being a state senator in the state of Washington, and maybe the biggest challenge compared to everybody else you'd be talking to? Shannon?
Oh, for me, this is the most beautiful area in the United States, bar none. And so for me, it is about the environment around us and the fact that we, frankly, get to live in a place where there are mountains and water and green, and that we are working hard to both protect those things and be able to participate in those activities. And so that would be the thing I would, state as a state, that would be something I would be very proud of. And frankly, I just love the communities here. I mean, I think it would be quite a privilege to be able to
and the challenge
represent.
That maybe
I think the challenge is that as progressive as we are in so many ways, we are actually a very regressive state. We have the most regressive tax system. We continue to have to push on a lot of the issues that are related to funding because of our regressive tax system. And I think that is Joe mentioned Montana, or Idaho, I'll mention Montana, there are so many states that I would think of as being more, I'll put conservative in air quotes, more conservative than this state, that really aren't when you look at how they actually distribute the burden of tax revenues and the ability to fund the services that the state funds.
Okay, and then Joe?
Yeah, we're very lucky in Washington State to have a very diverse community everywhere in terms of not just the people, but like the landscape as well, the technology and the industries that we have here. So we have to represent a whole host of things, and I think bringing that breadth of knowledge and that experience to other folks would be fantastic. We're also very lucky that I think we'll have a majority in the House, the Senate, and the Governor's office as well. But that also means that you have a responsibility to be more bold in terms of your progressive legislation and more bold in your visions as well. So the reason why I think we're able to talk about the environment and Initiative 1631 is because we're very lucky to be in a place where that would be supported. So bringing those values and bringing those ideas out to everywhere else where they may not necessarily have that opportunity, I think this is an opportunity for us to share. The hard part, you're right, we're progressive generally in the left side of the mountains, but not necessarily on the right side. So how do we work together to bridge that gap so we can support folks from all over Washington State and not necessarily just regionally speaking as well? Because I think that'd be tough. Because the things that would support folks in Eastern Washington, even though it's still affordable housing, progressive taxation, and whatnot, the solutions are different. So because of that diversity that we have, how do we bring solutions that can actually bridge that gap so that we're doing something that's competent and culturally competent for the folks that are there?
Okay, thank you. I think I've been kind of keeping a stopwatch. We probably have another time for maybe one more question. So let's give a hand to both of you. So is there a last question?
Okay, build on something he just said, it was interesting, the east-west divide, and I'm on the east side of the folks in 509 think that they're spending all their money over here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, stat guys, and I understand more of our money goes over there.
That's correct. Yes, that's totally correct.
How do you tell them that? Because they're very nice people. They're very, work hard, it's all just like us, they're all great, but there's this huge, huge, rub between the two sides.
There is.
And I experience
Yeah.
it on a weekly basis.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's true, and I think for me, it's the issue, you know, you can tell them that till you're blue in the face, but their perception and their perspective is going to be different, so to me, it's figure out the ways you can show them that even with their perception and what they're bringing to the table, no, here's why this makes sense, right? Like, here's the reason that whatever that tax structure is, or whatever this program is, or whatever it is, makes sense. I'm gonna show you how that is, but I don't think it does a lot of good to just sort of try to blue in the face explain that they're wrong because it doesn't work. But you know,
What's interesting,
realistically,
so
yeah.
immigration would seem like a more liberal, progressive type of issue, but that's impacting them very clearly economically because of what's going on with the farms and whatnot. So when you point out things that impact them on a daily basis, there's certain common ground that we can then work towards to find a solution. So what we would do is first find things that we both are aligned with, build a relationship, go from there, and then talk things through. Because you're right, we're not going to just say we actually subsidize the rest of the state. That's not a message that's going to resonate.
Yeah, well said.
Okay. Another question, a final thought?
Thanks you all for having us tonight. Appreciate it a lot. Appreciate your consideration. Don't forget to vote.